Hello lovelies, I'm Black Veil. Thanks for clicking on this video. Please consider subscribing. Today I want to get right into it. The Whale, the new movie starring Brendan Fraser, Sadie Sink from Stranger Things, and Hong Chow from the new movie The Menu and many other things. So, to start, no spoilers, just a synopsis of the movie and why I think this is the perfect comeback for Brendan. And when I do get into spoilers, I'll give a fair warning first. So, The Whale is about a morbidly obese and reclusive English professor that teaches over Zoom named Charlie, who's played by Brendan Fraser. He wants to reconnect with his estranged teenage daughter, named Ellie, who's played by Sadie Sink, for his last chance at redemption in his eyes. It's based on a 2012 play by Samuel Hunter, who also wrote this movie, and both were called The Whale. It was directed by Darren Aronofsky, and interestingly enough, at least to me, he also directed The Wrestler in 2008 starring Mickey Rourke, which was his big comeback into show business, as well as The Whale being that for Brendan Fraser. The entire film takes place in 2016 in Idaho in Charlie's apartment, with a few scenes of the outside, but it really stresses the point that this man is a recluse. Liz, his best friend, comes to visit him quite often and is played by Hong Chow, who seems to enable his food addiction, even though she is a nurse, and we aren't really sure at some points what her motives are, but they eventually become more clear. Brendan, Sadie, and Chow give outstanding performances throughout the entire movie, especially Brendan Fraser. It's easy to see why he got such a long standing ovation at the Venice Film Festival, and seeing him move to tears because of it actually brought tears to my eyes, and that was before I even saw the movie for myself. Most people know and love Fraser for so many movies, including the Mummy franchise, Blast from the Past, Encino Man, George of the Jungle, and so many more. But it has arguably been quite some time since we saw him as the leading man we know and love in a great movie that really shows off his acting chops. Until now, that is. This movie touches on so many different topics and issues, but, in my opinion, all work really well together. The novel Moby Dick is a large part of the movie, mostly having to do with a book report written about it, which also ties into the LGBTQ plus portion of the movie, as the sexuality of certain characters is a large theme of the movie. And the writer of Moby Dick, Herman Melville, was actually a gay man himself. Also, Moby Dick is about a whale, which is obviously what this movie's called, and refers to the obese character of Charlie and how he might be his own daughter's Moby Dick in a way, holding her back or in, like in the story of Moby Dick, but more on that later when we get to the spoilers. The entire movie takes place from Monday to Friday, so a very short time span in which a lot happens. So, let's move into spoilers. So if you have not watched the movie, I'd recommend doing so first, then coming back to watch the rest of this video, but this is your last warning for spoilers. And here we go. So, on Monday, Liz, who I mentioned is a nurse, comes over and diagnoses Charlie with congestive heart failure and begs him to go to the doctor to save his own life. It is implied that Charlie, being so large, close to 600 pounds or so, is the reason for the heart failure. Charlie says he cannot afford to go to the doctor, even though that's a lie, which we will come back to later. Liz is not only Charlie's best friend, but also the sister of Charlie's dead boyfriend, Alan, who was only ever shown in a photograph in the movie. You see, Alan and Liz's father was a man of the church and had arranged a marriage to a woman for Alan. During this time, Alan was also a student of then not overweight Charlie, who then taught his classes in person, and the two ended up falling in love and being together. On the day Alan unalived himself, it really was because of the stress from his father and his conflicting religious beliefs along with his sexuality. Liz understood this and blamed their father, but Charlie always blamed himself. He thought he could love Alan out of his sadness and fix him that way, but obviously that didn't work. This makes the relationship between Liz and Charlie even more complex, both trying to work through their grief of Alan's death, and at one point, Liz even says to Charlie, "You weren't the one that had to go identify his body." This really hurts Charlie because they weren't married at the time of Alan's death, and he responds with, "I was not family. They wouldn't allow me to." Once Alan was gone was when Charlie started packing on the pounds, which ended up making him quite immobile and therefore a recluse. Like I said before, he's an English professor, but he teaches his classes over Zoom now and pretends his webcam is broken so he doesn't have to let his students see how large he is. His last wish for redemption and salvation was to reconnect with his teenage daughter. Charlie had left his alcoholic wife almost a decade ago when his daughter Ellie was around 8 years old. He convinces Ellie, without her mother knowing, to come see him, and she begrudgingly agrees. Their relationship is quite contentious and manipulative from the start. I think Sadie Sink does a great job playing this character of Ellie, not really being able to tell if she's actually cruel and possibly a sociopath or just an angry teenager with major issues. When Ellie shows up at Charlie's apartment, she informs him she's not going to graduate high school unless she shows improvement in at least one of her classes. Charlie tells her he'll help her with her homework and essays if she continues to spend some time with him, even telling her he will give her all the money he has saved up. In all actuality, he has about $120,000 saved up that he was going to be leaving to Ellie anyway. Liz, his best friend, actually finds out about this as well and is quite upset with Charlie because she feels like she did so much for him, and there were plenty of times where a little bit of money could have helped her out. This is part of the character of Liz that upsets me a bit. Also the fact that she enables his unhealthy habits by bringing him food all the time and even yelling at him when he chokes on it and she has to save his life. But really, deep down, I think she's being an enabler because she needs Charlie's companionship as much, maybe if not more, than he needs her companionship. So her motives are not always the best, but I think the fact she truly cares about him and that they have the connection of Alan really pulls the whole thing together. There is also another character, Thomas, who is a Christian missionary, or so he says, that first shows up and knocks on Charlie's door while Charlie was actually pleasuring himself to gay porn, which caused him to have a panic attack or the beginning of a heart attack. And when Charlie lets Thomas in, he has him read him a book report on Moby Dick. It was obviously written by a child, and Charlie has all the words memorized, but hearing the words being spoken out loud by Thomas calms Charlie right down, and therefore kind of saves his life. Turns out this man Thomas says he's coming around to help and save Charlie. But when Ellie becomes curious about this man, she starts asking him questions about where he came from and what he's up to. Thomas tells her he ran away from his home and church in Iowa because he stole $24,000. And unbeknownst to Thomas, Ellie was recording everything Thomas told her. She ended up sending these recordings to Thomas's family, and they reached out to him and told him it didn't matter. They just wanted him to come home. This makes him so happy that the first thing he does is run to tell Charlie the great news. This is when Charlie reveals to Thomas that he is a gay man, and instead of being accepting and helpful like he originally intended to be for Charlie, he tells him he's disgusting, and this just proves to Charlie that the world is a sad and hateful place yet again. And I say yet again because there was also a pizza man named Dan that delivered pizzas to Charlie all the time, but Charlie would never open the door. He would instead slide the money through the mail slot and have him leave the pizza. But Dan would always ask Charlie through the door how he was and genuinely seemed to care about the man's well-being. That is, until he finally saw Charlie. He was horrified at the man's large size and actually ran away, which caused Charlie to go on an eating binge. He ate everything in the house until he got sick, and that was the part that almost felt exploitative, like a sideshow attraction or even a touch comical in the scene, which I know isn't what was intended, but I think it could have been handled in a better way. His students were also quite horrified when they finally saw what Charlie looked like. You could tell from the looks on their faces. So just another instance where Charlie was right about how the world looked at him and other morbidly obese people. At one point, Ellie asked her father, "Why weren't you there for me?" And Charlie's response, "Who would want me to be in their life?" How sad. The poor man had no self-worth at that point. All Ellie wanted was to know that her father loved her and wanted to be there for her. In fact, on their first day of hanging out, she asked Charlie to get up from the wheelchair he was sitting in and walk over to her. He tried, but decided it was too hard and gave up. This made Ellie storm out because she felt like he didn't care for her enough to even try. As for the essay Ellie needed for class to help her graduate, she and Charlie had argued over who would write said essay. Charlie ended up giving her an essay to turn in, and on that last day, Friday, Ellie stormed into Charlie's apartment screaming, "I got a feeling great on that essay you wrote. Are you trying to sabotage me? Do you not want me to graduate?" He asked her, "Did you read the essay?" She hadn't. Turns out it was the Moby Dick book report mentioned earlier that Thomas had read to him to calm him down. It was written 4 years prior by Ellie herself and sent to Charlie by his ex, Ellie's mom. This was why it meant so much to him and why it was good for calming him down. As Ellie read through the book report, she got emotional and realized Charlie had been trying to show her how special she is and that she can become something, whatever she wants to, in life. In the final scene, Charlie gets up and walks toward Ellie, like she had wanted him to do from the beginning. At this point, Ellie finally calls Charlie Daddy and begs him to stay with her. But then he levitates up into a bright white light. The scene then fades to a memory of Charlie at the beach with Ellie when she was little. The end. Although it is left open to interpretation on purpose, Brendan Fraser likes to think Charlie lived and received his redemption and salvation he had been looking for. I more lean towards Charlie dying in the end, especially since congestive heart failure without proper care does not usually end well, but also because the entire movie until the very end is dreary, dark, and rainy. But after being called Daddy and knowing his daughter wanted to reconnect with him as well, the outside finally showed some sun and the light shined through, especially with the bright white light Charlie levitated into. So Charlie, feeling like he was his daughter's Moby Dick whale, in a sense, holding her back because of not knowing what it could have been like having her daddy around, I think that was finally resolved for him, and I love how it all comes full circle. Charlie was able to help her in other ways, like by leaving her that $120,000 and helping her realize her full potential. I don't think Charlie wanted to live anyway. He blamed himself for Alan's death, and I also think he was tired of being ridiculed when seen, but sick of having to hide himself away. Such a beautiful, tragic story that was done in a mostly wonderful way. And I would suggest to anyone to watch this movie, especially if you're a Brendan Fraser fan. This is the perfect comeback for him, and I'm so happy to see him back on top where he belongs. So, comment below. Have you seen The Whale, or are you planning to? What did you think? I'm Black Veil. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe if you liked and want to subscribe. Hopefully catch ya in the next one.